I think we've all received this email chain of the Jackson Street scenario, and it's very concerning. And so I think council has said to me, we need to talk about that because that scenario was not good. And we know that there's a problem with people relinquishing their animals at a greater level than they've ever done before. All cities have found that their animal shelters are at capacity. And then people say, well, the no-kill thing isn't working. So the question mark, is it or is it not? And how do we ensure that the episode that happened this past week doesn't happen again?
So I think there are a number of policies and items included in traditional no-kill language that don't always make sense in every community, right? And so I think what's really important about our staff and our team is we stay up to date on the latest, like data-proven towns like us, what are they doing to offer life first, right? It's not intended to say we're going to shut down until we make sure we hit 90%. It's our plan to make, it's our intention to make policies that serve this community well, that serve San Angeloans well. We are operating with limited resources, like all city departments, and I recognize that everyone's asking for additional budget, additional people, but that is we're very limited. We have 4 animal services officers to cover our community. We're a growing community of 100,000 citizens and their pets, and we cover almost 60 square miles of area to patrol and respond to calls for service. And we respond 365 days a year. We go to all bite cases, cruelty cases, police assist, fire assist. We go to those round the clock. If it's a Sunday afternoon, if it's a Monday at 2 o'clock in the morning, those are calls that we're at with 4 animal services officers. So I think what contributed to the case at North Jackson was limited staff, limited availability in that response. We do, of course, have the animals in custody now. I have no expectation that they're going back to that household in that area. It's largely driven by the resources we have available for the response time. Calls for service for animal-related items are up 50% year over year. It's an issue that gets a lot of attention and gets a lot of calls to our area, to our division, that we don't always have the resources to cover. So the very first time we had a report of a bite, we were, of course, there within minutes. We do have reports there of the dogs at large a number of times over the summer, and we did respond each and every time. But when we're at other bite calls, there might be a delay in that response. And I'm pulling that information now to have really good data to report back to y'all. But so far, we spent all of Sunday, all of Monday, a good bit of Friday at this location addressing these issues, and of course do have the animals in custody.
Questions? Karen.
Good morning. I'm curious whether or not the animal shelter has contracts with Best Friends, American Pets Alive, or the Haas model, which is Human Animal Support Services. And I'm curious because a number of these organizations are being pointed to as culprits in other communities that have been sued for their policies. I can name them if it matters. El Paso is one. There's been an issue in Abilene, New York, but these are nationwide organizations.
The city doesn't have contracts with any of those organizations. As we set policy to offer life first, and then the math is the math, right? It's not that we're trying to hit this magic number of 90%. We are looking at a number of peer cities, other organizations, what they're pursuing, but there's no contracts with any animal welfare groups, the ones you've listed or others.
What about PAWS, your contracted partner? Do they have contracts with any of these organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, but I really couldn't speak to their legal status.
Yes. I think we would like to know the answer to that because there have been social media posts that indicate that they've received grant monies or donations from some of these organizations, and it's worth our scrutiny. We don't have enough information at this point to address it further, but I think it's worth knowing.
Meaning that PAWS received grant monies, and you're
Yes.
asking how those grant monies were utilized?
Yes. For example, here's a post made by Concho Valley Paws, and it says, "A big thank you to our friends at Best Friends Animal Society for a generous financial gift of so many thousands, a certain number of thousands of dollars." So Paws is not really under discussion here, but we do have a contractual agreement with them, so hence my question.
Isn't PAWS a nonprofit?
It
is.
is, and they are entitled to collect money. The concern is that some of these organizations are very much under fire across the nation.
And they're under fire
Their programs and
because,
policies that have basically failed. Multi-million-dollar lawsuits in some of these communities.
well, yes, go ahead, Tommy.
Question and then a comment a question for Morgan, and then I will have a follow-up comment. Morgan, didn't we, I don't know, a year, 18 months, whatever, approved one time, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 for additional
Yes, we did.
staff?
We did a directed patrol. City Council funded some overtime for after-hours weekend patrol of certain pockets of town where there were reports of packs of dogs at large. We fully expended those funds and provided weekly updates to y'all of our activity there.
So
Problem with it, Tommy, was that, they followed up and sent us reports on specific areas that they went because they were reported, and consistently the report came back, they found nothing.
Well, and that was the report. There was more to it than that, but that was part of when they made several calls to the North Jackson situation. There was no activity on some of those calls that they made. So I'm not discounting anything that happened there, but my question is that something, Morgan, that was helpful enough when we did that we should do that again? Is that something that would be helpful for you? Would it be something that would need to be, let's say, a permanent situation, or could you then come to us, if it wasn't permanent, come to us and say, we're seeing certain things happen that we may need some of this assistance with additional overtime. So maybe that's something we could consider too, if in fact it was, I'll say, successful enough in your opinion when we did it, that it would be helpful again.
Sure. There were a number of weeks that we reported back under that prior program of no activity at certain neighborhoods, but we did have a number of chronic areas that the dogs are at large from this specific household each Saturday morning. Well, of course, we're not catching that during the week, and so we built important relationships and compliance with those households. So it's something we could for sure consider.
It goes back to the same issue, is the animal shelter, and the issue with the aggressive dogs goes back to people. People own these dogs. People don't control these dogs. As long as ownership of pets is not taken as a responsibility by the public, we can't fund enough these issues, because that money that we gave, I promise you 90% of the reports came back, said they didn't find these dogs. And that is, whether the dogs sense it, I don't know. But here's what I do know is it's about people taking responsibility. We can't increase the shelter large enough. We can't increase the staff large enough. We can't do a lot of these things if the public doesn't understand their responsibility, particularly when it comes to aggressive dogs. or feeding cats. Yes, Lucy.
Okay, Morgan, on these ordinances, I think that was one of the concerns that a lot of constituents have, that they're not enforced. And we're talking about like the number of dogs that a person may have. We're talking about the spayed and neutered ordinance. There's a lot of ordinances that are not being followed through. Do you by any chance have any kind of reports that have the percentages of the citations that have been issued and that you have followed through, after a citation is given? Do these people do what is supposed to, or like, how do we track these citations is what I'm asking.
I can pull some reports. I wouldn't be able to speak to that information today. I don't have it with me today. And once they enter the court system, for example, there's a property, we issued 8 citations for tethered dog, more than 2 hours. And it's going through the lengthy process of a jury trial through municipal court. So while it's going through that process and they're having their due time through the court system, we have to halt all enforcement until the court hears that first case. So I can get y'all some information on that, though, and report back.
Well, I think that there had been we did something that gave a little more power to the municipal court, if that's the right word, for these citations and making people show up or they lose their animals. What was that? Because I know we tried to address some of the issues with municipal court and animals citations.
I'm not familiar.
You just did this last year. We got a memo on it.
I believe it was the speeding up the process through municipal court, eliminating some obstacles so we could quickly get to the court, get him in, and get him processed. I believe that's what it was.
I think it also dealt, if I remember correctly, with those people who the animal was released into the owner's hands and had X amount of days to spay or
Spay and neuter.
neutered. And if they didn't within that time frame, then it went quickly to the courts. Is that correct?
That's the backlog that I'm reporting back to y'all quarterly of the volume of unaltered pets returned to owner that we're filing through the court. So it's instead of writing a citation in front of the person or giving them a warning in 10 days, hey, you've got to comply with this, we can then go back and file in absentia, and they get a citation essentially in the mail. So it's filing a complaint. That's a new process we did implement last year, but it wasn't a change on the municipal court side, and it wasn't a more speedy court process. It was just an additional allowance that we can cite through the mail in a filed complaint instead of a ticket right in front of the person.
When we receive the information that the animal shelter is at capacity, and we call ourselves a no-kill facility, have we, I hate to ask for this information, but have we had to euthanize a number of dogs and cats with the overcapacity issues?
Well, first, I don't call us a no-kill facility. We have no such assurances. We take it day by day, case by case. It's our intention to offer reasonable resources with the amount that we have available to us. And so as far as achieving a no-kill status, that's not even language we really use. We try to implement and apply programming that offers life first to animals while still providing for the public safety. So we've not yet had to euthanize for space. When we do publish a list of a euthanasia list, these dogs shall be euthanized by this date, if not fostered, adopted, rescue, transferred. To date, each of those animals has been saved, but we, of course, euthanize regularly for aggression, reactivity, illness or injury beyond reasonable treatment. That hasn't stopped and will continue.
Well, I know this, the public constantly, and I get these emails, believe we're a no-kill facility. And and they say that, they use that terminology. So, and they think that's part of the problem. So it's important that you explain that we are not a no-kill facility, but what we are is what you just explained, and you might explain that again.
Yes, it's, life saving is a community ethic, and we're the shelter that this community wants us to be. And so to the extent that San Angeloans are adopting, fostering, coming and claiming and reclaiming their pets from the shelter, then those are live releases that we'll document as such. But to the extent that we do have to euthanize, as I mentioned, the math is what the math is. We don't make decisions on euthanasia like, well, I'm not going to euthanize this pet today because it's the end of the year and I'm at 89.9%. So I want to make sure I hit 90% for the year. Each case.
But we used to talk about those numbers.
Well, it was a goal.
Yeah.
But the more important goal is that each animal and each family is getting the appropriate services, whether that's enforcement or resources or whatever in between. That families are being served well, the community's being served well, and as a result, animals get a chance, a reasonable chance at life first.
Questions? Larry?
Yes, ma'am. I wonder if you could talk to your staffing if you have problems. It sounds like there's problems with issuing citations. Can you talk to that, please? Your manning?
Sure. And I'm sorry, to clarify, issues with issuing citations?
Well, you're not fully staffed at this moment. You explained to me before the meeting that you're going to be at 100%, but is that still adequate? I don't know how far that staffing goes back, but the city's grown considerably, and I'm curious if we've kept up with the needs.
Sure. So we are expected to be fully staffed as of September 1st. We have some new staff, two new team members onboarding on that day. But even at fully staffed, I have new hires that aren't certified yet. And as you mentioned, we are serving a community of 100,000 people. We did have an increase to our staffing last year with the addition of an office assistant to be able to better track data. But beyond that, there's the amount of care for the amount of staff available for direct animal care and the number of staff available to respond to calls for service and patrol the community have been unchanged for perhaps 8 or more years.
Calls
Some of them longer than that. The animal
haven't
services
increased?
officers.
Is that what you just said? I might have heard you wrong.
The number of staff available to respond to calls for service have remained flat for better than 8 years.
We added one last year.
No, we added an office assistant to be in-house for administrative work. The number of folks in the field patrolling, responding to calls for service is unchanged at 4 animal services officers for at least 8 years.
You can give us statistics then that said over the past 5 years, for example, the number of service calls asked for is
Up
what?
50%.
Yeah, so I think that's what Larry's kind of asking for maybe is, what's our history here? Okay, so in year 1, we had this many calls for service, year 2, this many calls, et cetera. And then the question mark, too, because it was brought up before, is that nationwide there seems to be, after COVID, many cities finding that people have relinquished their pets and that there's an over-pet population now. And with that said, have those individuals who before would accept some of our animals and we would have a person drive them to that city, et cetera. And I know last year, recently, you said that those services have stopped because all cities are feeling the pain of that. Is that
Right.
changed?
As the nation's embraced offering life first and pursuing opportunities for animals to be saved in a live release, those receiving agencies have dried up. We were aces at it for a number of years. We saw any hoops that those receiving agencies asked to jump through. Our staff and our team at PAWS did so. And so we did see that decline in 2020 and now down to, I believe we have one receiving partner that's consistently pulling from our facility, whereas it used to be 2 and 3 a month, with dozens of animals leaving out of our facility. So we knew that the transports were higher than the norm, higher than the industry standard, and it left us vulnerable too. When these receiving agencies dry up, what are you going to do? And we knew that that was coming.
Yes. Further question? Yes, Harry first and then Tom. Harry, you're first.
Appears like I'm seeing more pets on the street. Generally not aggressive, but they're running loose, probably gotten out of somebody's yard, wherever the case may be. The shelter's at capacity. We're adopting pets out on a regular basis, sometimes multiple weekends. Are we at capacity in San Angelo for the number of people that want to adopt? And we're still limiting ourselves to no kill unless it's necessary. We're not being able to transport animals outside of San Angelo. Is it time to think differently about what we're doing and how we're doing it?
Sure, and we're absolutely rethinking, what are our opportunities, what tough decisions have to be made. Adoptions are down locally, return to owner as a percentage are up year over year. So it's one of many, for sure, we can absolutely and do reconsider that regularly.
Bob?
I was going to say, maybe it's time to relook at our processes again. We do that at certain periods of time, and maybe it's another one. When we first took over the animal services in my department, we had a high kill. We reduced that to 50%. That was still too many animals being killed, so we made some changes. We try things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Maybe it's time to kind of look at our processes now and our policies, and maybe we can alter a little bit, change a little bit, and see if we can come up with some kind of hybrid solution to deal with some of those problems. Now, animals loose, that may be anecdotal. I'm not sure if we have hard data on whether or not there's actual packs of animals running around loose. There
No
may be
census
some.
count on that?
Say what?
No census count on that?
But the point is, I think there's always time to take a look and open up a dialogue, and let's take a look at it to see if there's things we can change, and we're always doing that. We are a change agent. We try to do things differently. If they don't work, we change. So maybe it's time to do it again.
Tom?
Morgan, I think at one point in time, how many of the pets you see that you bring into there that you pick off the street are probably repeat offenders, if I'm using the right word?
For this year, our repeat offenders are quite decreased. There are some usual suspects that I haven't seen in a good while because we did that case management. We invested in that household, got them matched with spay-neuter, low-cost vouchers, things like that. So this year, and I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you the exact number, but this year, 2023, our repeat offenders are largely decreased from prior years.
Well, I think
Which is good to hear.
Well, it's good to hear, but number one, it's an animal. They're hard to control. They're never at the same spot. I mean, you can ask the police, you can ask Frank, anybody. If hey, there's a problem going over here with a group of people. By the time you get there, that crowd's kind of gone. They migrate. We get that. I thank you for coming up here and giving a report, which you were unprepared, or you didn't have to give. But it's something we need to look at further down the line and try to help you and assist it. But it's still one of the biggest expenses we have, and the revenue that you get to provide for that, it limits your capability, what you can do. And we understand that. We want to thank y'all for doing a nice job, but it'd sure be great to look at some policies to where we could reduce the repeat offenders and try to maybe hold some owners accountable for what they have.
Well, I
And
think
what gets out.
particularly right now, Tom, and the rest of council, is with this episode on Jackson Street, you know, having one child attacked. I mean, we always see on the news about an animal that was an aggressive dog bit a family or built a child or attacked a child. We don't want to be a community where there's a story about that happening. So when we all got this email this over the weekend and about the Jackson Street episode, certainly red flags have gone up for all of us. And even though it was one instance, one child being attacked is too many. And so we're concerned. The public is concerned. And yes, I'm sorry that you weren't expected to come forward, but this recent episode has put a lot of red flags out there, and I'm getting lots of emails and text messages from people about, what are you doing? Why aren't we managing this? Why does this happen? So we as council have to have some answers and some information to share with the public. And so today was necessary to ask those questions in a public format so that people have the information you've provided and the questions have been asked by council that are necessary.
Mayor, if I may
haven't-
as well, I can tell you right now, as far as conscientious, I mean, I think Morgan, and thank you, Tom, for saying that. Morgan's a very conscientious individual. She does really good work. I know the challenges are there, and with her coming in, my office used to receive calls every week, emails every week, and those have pretty much gone away. These are the occasional situations that we face like this weekend, you know, where you have a packet of animals and they're responding and trying to do the job that they can, the best they can. But I just didn't want to move on until I had an opportunity to say that Morgan's doing a great job, and I do appreciate her with the resources that she has or the lack thereof. I know in the past couple of years we've put more resources toward the animal shelter to make sure that it runs better, that it has what it needs. From the ventilation system to just pretty much everything that needed a lot of work for the past several years. So, Council, thank you for doing that. But again, I just wanted to make sure that as we move on, I know that she's doing the best work. Morgan's doing the best work she can at this point with the resources she has, and we do appreciate you for that, Morgan. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yes, and I think all of us have probably received fewer emails than when we did in 2017, when we really had a crisis on our hands. Some of you, as new council members, don't know that time period, but there was a time period when it was really, really, really bad. So it is not to diminish your work and your effort and your review of the issues. So don't take this conversation as a criticism, but as an opportunity to better explain to the public what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're looking at, etc. And unfortunately, one instance where a child's safety was at risk brings up lots of questions, and I think you've addressed those. I'm sure we'll hear from the public again today on our questions and answers, etc. We're here to help support, but your work and effort is dynamically different than it was in 2017 and the issues that existed out there. So we've made progress, but as they always say, that's yesterday. Now what are you doing tomorrow? And so that's really what we're saying today is a lot of progress, but what are we doing tomorrow to continue to improve the situation? And that's really the question. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for coming forward unprepared. Did you want to add one more thing? Because you sound like you did.
Thank you so much. Although we've changed a number of policies and done so much research, our main goal over the last 6 years has been to professionalize the department, that my team members are trained and educated so that they have the necessary information and discernment so that there are less complaints coming to you, that they have the latest information, that they are sharp individuals and they invest heavily in their job and they hear this feedback from y'all. And so I appreciate the continued investment. I appreciate the direction and support, and I have a number of deliverables that I'll certainly get back to y'all.
You always do.
Thank you.
Thank you.